Chase, if you were going to describe all the different times we've worked together and all the things we've done, what one word might you use to describe who we are?
Well, the one word I would describe me and you would probably be builders. We are builders.
We love building things. We like fixing things too, but that's a part of building too. I remember a telephone call that we had some time back where you were taking an engineering class. What was it that you were building in that engineering class in the summer months?
We were building bridges.
They were building bridges, okay? And part of the project was the bridge had to span, how wide?
About,
10 inches, I remember.
yeah, about a foot.
Yeah, I think it was just under a foot, about 10 inches. It had to be supported on both ends, and it was about, how wide?
6 inches?
About 6 inches, 5 or 6 inches wide. All right? And so they had to make a bridge in this engineering class. And I said, how did that work?
We were able to put 4 paint bottles on our bridge before it cracked.
Before it cracked. And I said to him, did you use triangles? And you said,
Yes, for the side rails, but nothing else.
just so the paint bottles wouldn't fall off. And I said, I think I have a better idea. When you come to my house in a couple of weeks, why don't we build a bridge? And we'll see how much weight that will hold, all right? And we'll make it completely out of triangles. And why would we use triangles?
Because triangles are the strongest shapes.
That's right. Triangles have the strongest structure. And so when we came to visit from Arizona, and we had the thing kind of laid out, I had drawn on a piece of cardboard a design for a structure with all kinds of triangles. And what do we call that thing?
Trusses.
We made trusses. And so we took toothpicks. Are toothpicks very strong by themselves?
No.
No, not very strong. So we took the toothpicks and laid them on each of the lines of the drawing, and then we used what to put them together?
A hot glue gun.
Yeah, we took a hot glue gun and we put a dab of hot glue at each point where the triangle came together at the point. And we made these long trusses, okay? When we got one truss made, then we made another truss, then we made another truss, and we actually made 6 trusses. All right? Well, that's one way to make triangles. The next thing we did was we took each one of those trusses and we put them together in triangles of trusses. Each side of the triangle was one of these trusses. Okay? And then what did we do with the trusses?
We put them together to make the bridge.
We glued them onto the bottom of a little piece of flimsy plastic cardboard. Really flimsy. All right? Now we have a bridge. We had to weigh it. Your bridge in the engineering class weighed just about a pound.
About 4 ounces.
No, that's our new one.
Oh yes.
Our new one was just 4 ounces. We had to use a postal scale because there wasn't anything that would measure 4 ounces. I don't know how much postage that would make, but it wasn't very much, and it was very, very light. So then we had to do something else. What was the next thing we had to do?
We had to test it.
We had to test it. So what we did is we put 2 big, thick books on the table, and our dining room table is kind of our workshop, and we put the bridge to span 10 inches. And then what did we do to test the strength of the bridge?
We used water bottles.
Water bottles. We used paint in your engineering class, paint bottles, but we used water bottles. Do you remember how much weight about a gallon of water weighs?
About 3 pounds?
6 pounds, I think, if I remember right. 6 pounds. Okay? 8.7? Okay, cool. Remember that. Okay, I didn't, but then you remember that. So we started putting water bottles on. We got one row of water bottles, and the bridge held. Whoa, that was incredible. So we put a little platform across there, and we put another row of water bottles. Did the bridge hold some more?
Yes.
How much weight did the bridge actually hold?
About 36 pounds.
36 pounds of water bottles stacked up, and we only stopped because if we put any more water bottles on this tower of water bottles, they would have fallen off. Did the bridge fail?
No.
After 36 pounds, this 4-ounce bridge did not fail.
No.
I was impressed with your bridge,
It wasn't just mine, it was ours.
because we're builders. Thank you, Chief. And I do that because Jesus was a builder. Jesus was a contractor. He was a carpenter. He knew how to make things. And he knew how to do it right. In fact, he actually told a story at one point. We find that in Matthew, the 7th chapter. If you want to turn to Matthew 7, verse 24 and following. At the very conclusion of his longest sermon, we call it the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew, he concludes with a parable. It's a story, but it's a story that carries a lesson, a message. Okay? And here's what he told. Therefore, anyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on a rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. And the rain came down, and the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority, and not as their teachers of the law. Jesus knew how to build things. Out of wood? Out of toothpicks and hot glue? Well, not exactly toothpicks and hot glue. But when he taught us, he used a blueprint that we could follow, and we could put the sticks of our lives, our thoughts, our ideas, our goals, our possessions, our ideas of what we want to accomplish, our possessions, our livelihoods. We could line them up on his blueprint in ways that made things incredibly strong. The Message translation translates the story of the wise and foolish builders. And the tornadoes came roaring through. All right, the tornadoes came roaring through. You may not have the appreciation for that like we do out there in Missouri and different places in Iowa, where tornadoes were a normal way of life for us. And if you didn't have a good solid basement to climb into, when the sirens went off, it was a scary time. And the winds would come up, and all of a sudden the things were swirling around and head for the basement. And the thing had to be strong enough to be able to stand up to that terrible, terrifying storm. We were down in Miami, on the north side of Miami, when Hurricane Andrew hit in 1992. We had just bought a house there in Miami, and We put the boards over the windows and we screwed things together and tried to keep it together. And for 12 hours, the wind just howled. I wouldn't have any idea how fast or how strong the wind was at that point. But when we walked out of the house the next morning, there was hardly a tree standing. And all the street signs, all the stoplights, all the traffic control signs were all gone. All blown away. 12 hours, blasting wind. But in our house, we only lost one tab off of one shingle. One tab off of one shingle, and an awning that was going to catch the wind anyway. I didn't have time to roll that one up or anything. There are ways that you can build that can withstand the storm. But if you line up the things about your life in a way different than the pattern that God gave us, when the storm comes, oh, by the way, did I mention? He uses the same list of disasters for both the wise builder and the foolish builder. Both lives had to go through the same time of testing, just like both bridges had to endure the same kind of testing. But when the fifth paint bottle went on, the first bridge collapsed, even though it was many times heavier and stronger than our little flimsy bridge. It looked like it should have held up much better because it had a lot more strength. It had weight, it had power. But it wasn't done smart. We could take a tiny little 4-ounce bridge. I guess the pictures did show up here, didn't they? Yes. Did you see the pile of bottles? Piled up on that little tiny flimsy piece of plastic and toothpicks. And it never broke. I still have it in my office back home. Why? Because when God laid out the blueprint, let's just turn to the blueprint. Can you look at it with me? The 5th chapter of Matthew is the beginning. And he starts off this lesson by telling us how to line up the elements of our life in a way that conforms to God's blueprint. All right? I'm going to zip through here and just hit a couple of highlights with each one. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, I don't know what your translation says when it refers to poor in spirit, but you know what? It comes to mind in my own personal translation, being poor in spirit. I'm not a bragger. I'm not a boaster. I can't just tell everybody how good I am, how wonderful, how strong, how powerful I am. I can't walk around with this great big, six-pack abs. I lost my six-pack abs about 25 years old, yes. And I can show off my physique and my power. But if I'm poor in spirit, I don't have to spend that kind of energy telling you how good I am. So it helps me to line up with my fellow human beings. Who lines up with a bragger? Nobody. Nobody finds that becoming. Nobody wants to hang out with somebody who always has to be the top dog, has to win in every game, has to be the one who makes everybody else feel small and little. It helps us to line up with our fellow human beings, our neighbors and friends and family. Oh, wait a minute, but what's the reward? What's the reward if we keep our human relationships in line? What's the reward? It says here, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Wait a minute. According to God's plan, when we live in a sense we can be at peace with our friends and neighbors, with a spirit that doesn't have to just brag about how we're the biggest and the baddest and the strongest. God rewards us by giving us something divine. He gives us membership in His kingdom. Isn't that cool? One thing that looks like it's doing bringing one benefit actually brings us something even more special. Let's try another one. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Mourn? This country is based on our freedom to pursue happiness, not mourning. This is an un-American scripture. Blessed are those who mourn. It doesn't say we want this country because we want to mourn. No, we want to pursue happiness. Every commercial you see tells you how you're going to be more happy if you buy this stuff. Well, wait a minute, unless it happens to be a drug company, and then half the commercial is this is what's going to do if it poisons you, and it could die, and you could go blind, and you could go deaf, and you could, have all your hair fall out, and you could get flat feet, and you could do... So by the way, after that, go ahead and still buy this thing. You'll be happy. No. If you mourn, you'll be comforted. No, wait a minute. Where's the comfort going to come from? Is it going to come from people who are around you saying, oh man, I'm so sorry you have to be so sad? No. People want you to be happy, like they're happy. The comforting comes from God's comforting Spirit. The great Comforter comes to those who grieve over their sins, their shortcomings, their inadequacies, the things that don't measure up with what we'd like them to be. And God comes in, and like a father picking up a child on the floor who's crying, lifts us up, stands us back up on our feet, puts his arms around us and holds us close and say, it's okay. We'll make it better. My grandkids got me a shirt. Don't panic. Papa can fix it. All right? Don't panic. Papa can fix it. For those who mourn over our brokenness, don't panic. Your Father in heaven. Listen carefully. Your Father in heaven can fix it. When we line up with our human beings, God comes in and puts us in a different relationship with Him too. His plan is so unique. What happens in one level of our lives impacts on exactly what level we are in heaven. Blessed are those who are meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Oh, wait a minute. I'm going to step on somebody's toes. The meek don't look like Donald Trump, or Hillary Clinton either, for that matter. Because they're trying to tell you how strong they are, how powerful they are. I'm going to make everything great again. I'm going to inherit the most powerful position in this country. Because I'm going to tell you how smart I am, how good I am, how powerful I am. You know something? It ain't true. You can't inherit the earth without a sense of being meek and being aware of your weaknesses. You cannot be included in that very special thing where we call the family of God without acknowledging you can't do it by yourself. I want you to listen to the blueprint here if you can. I don't want to, maybe I've spoiled everything by talking about politics, but we hear a lot of bragging and not a lot of meekness. Meekness doesn't win ultimately. Bragging doesn't win. Meekness does. Knowing how we are knowing a reality of our heart. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they'll be satisfied and filled. Stop and think about it. When was the last time you looked forward to being hungry? Let me see the hands. I'm looking forward to being hungry. I'm looking forward to being thirsty. No, those things are considered bad. Because we like to have our desires, our hungers, our thirst satisfied by the things of this world. But when we line up our hungers, our appetites, our desires, our life goals in a way that satisfies our own hungers and our own pleasures and our own desires, it's going to be like the bridge that just goes. But if we hunger to be right with God, if we thirst to be in fellowship with Him, if we make His priorities our priorities, if we empty ourselves out and say, Lord, you use me to do what you want to do, wow, then all of a sudden we are satisfied. Blessed are those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Mercy is a very difficult concept. You know what mercy really means? Looking around and seeing people for who they really are. We've had some tragedies in Dallas and different places around the country. We've had some very bad things happen in the last few weeks. Because the world says, I don't get what I want out of life until I stand up and demand it by the point of a gun or a threat or a protest or a march or hollering and shouting through a loudspeaker. I will have what I want. And I don't care what you want or what you need or what you desire. Mercy, on the other hand, looks at the other individuals and sees you for who you really are and values you for who you are and what you are. Blessed are those who empty out their own self-protective desires and look to the welfare of someone else. And then, like a miracle, your own needs are recognized and you will receive the same mercy with which you offered mercy yourself. People will see your needs and understand you better, and they will be able to respond. But also God will bring mercy. There's none of us who doesn't need God's grace and mercy, but only if we offer it to other people. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Oh, I could go down through this list. Every time we put ourselves in line with our brothers and sisters, our neighbors, our loved ones, our family members, we don't see ourselves as superior. We don't puff ourselves up to be real big. We look at others and see their real needs. We see their real personalities, both their strengths and their weaknesses. We have a purity of heart, so we're not just trying to grab something for ourselves, no matter what the cost might be. Suddenly we line up with God's kingdom as well, and His blessing pours out. I drew a little diagram on a piece of paper. We took little tiny toothpicks that you could snap with a single finger. They had no strength whatsoever. And I put them together on this little tiny drawing. Each one was just 1.5 inches long. And I stuck them together with hot glue. But when the test came, it held an incredible amount of weight and never broke. Was I just doing a sermon illustration or? No! I was showing my grandson how to build smart. It's a lesson he will never forget. Jesus said, I want you to build smart. I want you to build your pieces of your lives together in the pattern that I've set for you. Your divine plan. If you just follow my instructions, if you live for me in the way that I've shown you how, are you going to avoid a storm? You're going to avoid an earthquake? You're going to avoid a tornado? You're going to avoid a flood? You're going to avoid a Hurricane Andrew? No. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you you could avoid all that stuff. I'd be telling you a fib. Because the doctor's probably going to tell you some bad news somewhere along the line. Or you're going to get bad news from somebody along the line, and you may even have to live in a country that has a recession again. Boy, that was painful. That took forever to get out of. How about a world war? Anybody looking forward to the next world war? May have to go through one. I don't know. Said there'll be wars and rumors of wars all the days until Jesus comes back. Nobody said we're going to get off without that. But no matter what happens in your personal life, in your family life, in your physical life, in your financial life, in your national life, in your international life, you will be able to stand up and smile and say, it's going to be okay. Because when the river goes back down and the wind stops howling and the hail stops beating against the walls, I'm going to be still standing. And you know why? I built according to the plan that Jesus gave me for my life. I built on the plan that he sketched out for me, and I will survive and endure because my house is sitting on the rock. It is the Lord Jesus Christ. A good friend of mine years ago, he looked at what I was planning to do when I went to my first congregation. And he said, Bob, I'm very, very scared for you. He said, I think there's a very high likelihood that what you're planning, what you're preparing for, what you're going into, is going to end in failure. That's before I actually knew that was a possibility. I hadn't bumped into that yet. I'd always won. Thought I always would. Thought I had the Midas touch. I could just take the worst possible situation and make it okay. He said, what happens to you, Bob Douglas, if this thing doesn't work out like you expect it to? And the question took me completely off balance. I was not prepared for it. And had to stop and think. Had to think sort of on my feet. And I went down through all of the possibilities. And after a few moments of consideration, I said, when I started planning this, I knew in my heart of hearts I was God's man. That's not ego, that's not boasting. That's just an identity thing. I knew God had chosen me, and was working through me and was going to use me in some way that he had in mind. I was God's man. I was living his life. I was doing things the way he wanted it done. I had put my life on the same pattern that he had laid out for me, to the best of my ability. I'm still learning how to do better. Don't give up on me, I'm still learning. But if this works, or if it doesn't change the reality that I am still God's man. And I'm going to hold on to that, no matter what the results are. Because that's what I am on the inside. That's my pattern of life. "20 years, God took me out of pastoral ministry and gave me work to do in the business community." And you say, like my friends did back when we were in seminary, when you were preaching every Sunday, you were in the pastoral ministry. If you didn't preach every Sunday, you were a casualty to the ministry. That's the expression they use. You're a casualty to the ministry. I always thought that was a weird expression, but then that's neither here nor there. 20 years. And God was still using me as his man, even though I wasn't in the pulpit every Sunday. You see, when you line things up according to his blueprint, whether you endure a 20-year storm, it was pretty tough. You're in the business community, you're making a living in business, and then in 2008, business goes completely crazy, and you're out of work again. When the winds blow, and the streams rise, and the payments are still due, and you don't have a job, and you go to work driving a courier car for $8 an hour, and you can't find a place to preach if your life depended on it, and the winds begin to howl, my friends, I can tell you, the weight comes on you. But I'm also here to tell you, it don't break. I'm here to tell you, it doesn't break you. It doesn't crush you. It doesn't destroy you. It doesn't eliminate you. God's plan is stronger than anything else anyone has ever designed or developed. And when the winds stop blowing, and the streams go back within their banks, and the earth stops rocking and rolling under your feet, you're still standing.